Hello and welcome to the Cardiac Cats YouTube channel. I'm your host, Jacob Shorba, and we are here to wrap up the 2025 NFL Draft. Kinda not, right? Gonna talk about day 3, what the Jaguars did, and then, a couple days from now, hopefully we'll be able to give a good recap on this whole class. There's some players that I'm gonna have to watch that I did not have scouted this year that they went and drafted, and there's a lot of guys, it felt like, on day 3 that ended up being the case for. I had a lot of names on my big board that ended up not going drafted this time around. Now, some of these might. The draft is finishing right now, but the Jaguars have made their final pick, so it's pretty much done for them. And if I end up being wrong, well, we'll talk about it in the final video, but they have made their final pick as far as we know. So, with that said, we got 6 players to talk about here, and it starts out with a bang from Jacksonville. Now, Bhayshul Tuten, I don't know if I had him ranked as high as where he was drafted, but this is one of those picks where, in spite of that, there's a lot of upside with Tuten. So he is a really good athlete, right? Super fast player, ran a 4.32, I believe, at the combine, and he's got decent size to him. So this is a guy that has a lot of good traits to work with. Now, we'll look at his production here. He had over 1,000 yards rushing this last season. You can see he's relatively involved in the receiving game, especially early on in the year, and then they kind of toned it down. But he's someone who can kind of play an all-around role for your team. So I like that. I think that's a good addition, and we'll see if he has a big role with the Jaguars this year. That could be the case. It could also not be the case, right? I wouldn't say this acquisition would be enough to make me move Travis Etienne. And I think at this point, I would probably have Etienne as a starter in 2025 unless you're really high on Tuten based off what he does in rookie minicamp and training camp and just the rest of the offseason. So those are my thoughts there. The one thing that I have to know with Tuten, though, he has had a fumbling issue in his career. He's had some really bad ones. This last year, he had 4 fumbles. The year before, he had 5. And technically before that, he had 0, but he's playing with, what is this, North Carolina A&T, I'm guessing? Not really a top school, right? So once he transferred, really struggled with fumbles. That's something worth noting here. And if you end up fumbling a lot, you're just not going to be on the field. We saw that with Tank Bigsby, his rookie season. So that's the big concern with Tuten, as far as I would see it. Now, the next pick, Jack Kiser, was another one. I did not end up scouting him too much. I had watched him shortly in summer scouting. I did not finish the evaluation because at the time, you could see this with Jack Kiser when we look at the total snaps before 2024. He was like never really a full-time player. He had really good play according to the grades, but he never really got on the field full-time until, I guess, 2024. And he kind of was just a forgotten name this year. Didn't really hear a lot of people talk about him. And when you look at these grades, I mean, it's phenomenal, right? Like, he's doing good at everything. So that's exciting. He is an older prospect. I believe this is someone who has good leadership qualities from what I remember hearing about him. So I think it's a strong addition to a linebacker core that you got to keep in mind, this group is not going to be around forever. Devin Lloyd, we do not know the status of the 5th-year option. I'm starting to feel like they don't accept it just because a lot of time has gone by. And Foye Oluokun, well, he did get extended. I believe this is the last year with guarantees. So you could see a lot of overhaul there. And you saw some investments from the Jaguars at the position for that reason. Now, next pick here, Jalen McLeod. Let's say McLeod. I might be saying that wrong. It lists him as a linebacker. But you look at his snaps, he is more of an outside linebacker. So more of your 3-4 kind of guy. He is undersized. So that is a little bit of a concern here. But you can have good pass rushers that are a bit smaller. Now for him, really damn good pass rush grade this last year. And you see some really nice explosive play on the limited snaps that I've seen from him. So I think he could be a nice edge 3 for now. I would like him to maybe be more of an edge 4 long term. I still think they need to add there. but he at least adds to an area that was really weak on this team. And so I do like the addition for that reason. I do think maybe there were some other players they could have targeted, of course, but at the end of the day, you need to get more at that position. And they end up doing it with a pretty solid depth player for this roster. Now, getting to the last three here. Jaguars picked up a Navy prospect. This Rayuan Lane. Probably just destroyed that name too. Forgive me. This was a draft pick that went through a lot of teams, right? And we saw Jacksonville do a lot of moving around. It's going to be a James Gladstone thing. Looking at him, I think the coverage obviously stands out. The run defense does. Tackling, I don't like the missed tackle percentage. That's a little bit of a concern at safety. There's a reason why we call it safety, right? You kind of want to be the safety blanket for the defense. You can't tackle. That's going to hurt it. You also had a lot of penalties this last year, so there's some things that would maybe be a little concerning. But this could be a player that maybe the Jaguars see as more of like a special teams contributor. That could definitely be the case. But it is interesting. You know, you don't see a lot of draft picks out of Army or Navy, and Jacksonville ends up picking one up here. Probably not a lot of stock I would put into this, though. Keep in mind, we're getting into the 200s with these last ones, as there was a huge gap between where Kiser went and where Jalen went. Now, last two picks here. Jonah Monheim, I can actually talk about because I have watched him pretty extensively. When I originally watched him in the summer, he reminded me a lot of like Cooper Beebe from Kansas State. You remember him? He is playing for the Dallas Cowboys now. Monheim, he's someone that got the nickname Dancing Bear. He's had some really good play, I think, especially just like out in space trying to block defenders. Pretty good ability to mirror people, but you do see his size. I mean, he is a lighter player. He played a lot at tackle in college, and then in his final year, he was one of the very few players that was allowed to move to what his position would be in the NFL. And when he did that, you saw he didn't have as great of a season, although technically didn't allow any sacks. So, you know, ups and downs there, but he doesn't have a ton of length, right? That is a limitation here with him. And so you saw that become a problem at the Senior Bowl, and he was unfortunately, a guy who just really did not stand out there in a good way. And that was a little bit my concern. I kind of wondered if he wouldn't go drafted because of it, but he did have good film beforehand. There is something to work with here. I think at bare minimum, you know, Jonah is probably a good depth player for the Jaguars. Probably not an ideal starter, but someone you can add to the offensive line. Feel good about what he's going to offer to that group and to add more competitiveness there. Now, last guy we'll get into, LeQuint Allen. He was another Senior Bowl guy. Kind of an all-around player from what I remember. You see a heavy receiving profile here. 78 targets in 2024. So heavily involved as a receiver. 1,000 yards. There's some really interesting stuff to work with here. And he's not even 21 years old. So I will actually pull up the draft profile really quick because I'm curious what he ran. How he is from an athletic standpoint. He was, unfortunately, it seems like a lot of the names I barely didn't put on my big board the Jaguars targeted this year. So he did not run a 40-yard dash, unfortunately. But, yeah, he is a taller guy. I do remember that. I think he's going to be someone that you're definitely going to talk about the receiving profile. It's very notable here. But, yeah, he was just, unfortunately, like a reason why I did not really scout him. I didn't think he really stood out in any specific regard. It's a very deep running back class as well. You know, there were definitely players I would have rather taken that I'd put on my board at this point. But I do think that he can help you out in the receiving game. I believe as a blocker. Yeah, he's good as a blocker. That's the one other thing with him. He really stood out at the Senior Bowl in pass protection, and obviously, based off the grading, took a huge step up this last year. But I think you like what he would offer on passing downs, And so that could be a pretty nice addition for the Jaguars. But those are their 6 picks that they had today. Overall, I wouldn't say there's a pick that's clearly a home run. I think Tuten could be that, right? I think he could be the RB1 of the future. And if you're, I'll say this pretty early, if you're in a fantasy league, might be a good pick to go make if he's available at maybe a later point, like a dynasty startup or anything like that, because I could see this being the player that ends up taking over this backfield eventually for the Jaguars. I think he has everything you need. It's just a question of, can you stop fumbling? Can you give us the ball security that's going to give us the trust to put you on the field more? So that's the big question there. But overall, you see a lot of intangibly rich picks. Everything we've heard about these players so far, I know Monheim is another one of those guys. So really like that for the Jaguars. It's not a... I'll be completely honest here, right? I'm not going to lie to you. It's not a super exciting day 3, right? It's not picks that are going to blow your socks off, right? But there are players who have potential here. And I think add something to the team. And that's good to get on day 3. That's kind of the expectation. And so that's where they end things off in the 2025 NFL Draft. Definitely an interesting one. Different from what we're used to, because most years you have a ton of picks all around the draft. This year you go from, trading up to number 2, giving up a future first. You lose 36. You don't pick after 2 until 88. And then you have a bunch of picks until 107. And you don't pick again until 194. So there's like 80 plus picks in between these different groups of selections. So very weird draft for the Jaguars compared to what we've seen before. But ultimately, I think they're going to have some starters out of this thing. I think Tuten will be one. Milam, I think, is a left guard for this team, maybe right off the bat. I would like if he could sit for a year. Sorry, if he could sit for a year. Caleb Ransaw, I think, is definitely going to be involved as a safety for this team and a back-end guy. And what do I say about Travis Hunter? I mean, he's probably going to be 2 starters for you. So that's where it ends up. But we're going to wrap this thing up there. Like I said, give me a little bit of time to check out these players and try to get honest opinions on them, because unfortunately, I just can't really offer a whole lot on some of them because I just didn't scout them that close. And so want to definitely watch some film before we give like final grades and talk about what they're really going to offer to the Jaguars. So with that said, want to shout out our channel members: Premier Seer 904, Nightmare Eco, Gator John Bites, Ichi Wiener, Mr. Dolphin, Scrubber Ducky 500, Brian Foster, and Frangies. Thank you guys so much for supporting the channel. It's been a great draft season. Still got content coming out because we got to wrap this whole thing up over the next couple of weeks. But with that said, enjoy the rest of your day, and finally, go Jags.